And now, the list of things that you can buy at the Chicago Reader store at chicagoreader.com. Things to wear like Chicago Reader hats, t-shirts, bandanas, and face masks. Things for your daily life like the Chicago Reader camping mug, Chicago Reader tote bags, and a Chicago Reader reporter's notebook. Things for you to read like our Reader recipes, the Chicago Reader 420 Companion, our Chicago Reader Best of book series from journalists Maya Dukmasova, Mike Sula, Ben Jarofsky, and Lior Galil, the Chicago Reader coloring book, and the Chicago Reader Stay Home puzzle. Find the Chicago Reader store at chicagoreader.com and show your support for the nation's first free weekly newspaper since 1971.
Bonus time of the Ben Jarofsky Show as I speak. It's Wednesday, June 8th, 2022. Here's the headline in my beloved Bright One, home delivered every day. Showed it to my distinguished guest so that he knows it's legit. Yes, I get an actual newspaper, which is kind of ironic, given what I want to be discussing with my distinguished guests. Anyway, here's the headline in the Bright One. Lightfoot running, an uphill race. Mayor launches re-election campaign, but she faces a fraught fight for second term. Baloney. She's in like Flint. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. There'll be a runoff, and then she'll mop the floor with ever. Why? Because she's mean and nasty, and that's what you like, Chicagoans. You love your mayors mean, you love your mayors nasty, and the nastier and the meaner they are, the more you love them. You're sick and twisted, Chicago. You need help, okay? I'm just saying that to you. There was a great song back in the day that my distinguished guest remembers called Cruel to Be Kind. That's how most Chicagoans view their mayor. The crueler she is.
Greg Kinn. I believe was that Greg Kinn?
No, that was not. Oh my God! We may have to edit that out because that's really going to undermine the cred of my distinguished guest, who hasn't even introduced himself yet. I'm not going to. It was not Greg Kim. It was a Nick Lowe, I want to say, but don't quote me on that, Chicago.
Don't quote me on this. Edit that out. Start the show all over again right now. I insist.
Are you kidding? That was a great riff. I can't. All right. Without further ado, I'm going to ask my distinguished guest to introduce himself. Distinguished guest, introduce yourself.
First of all, not distinguished. Second of all, Charlie Meyerson, you may remember me from such famous radio stations as WXRT, WNUA, WGN, and from a non-radio station, the Chicago Tribune. But today, and almost every weekday, you may know me as the proprietor of the ChicagoPublicSquare.com daily email news briefing, hailed by the Chicago Reader as the best news summary in your email inbox. I couldn't be prouder.
Yes, and you should be proud. So let me begin by saying this. This is the absolute truth as opposed to most of the things I say in the show, which are more or less lies. Just kidding. But every day I arise very early. I'm a very early riser, about 10 a.m. And I get my little trusty. Charlie's like, man, I've been up since 5.
No, you're my prime audience because, as you know, ChicagoPublicSquare.com goes live each weekday at 10 a.m. So you are exactly in the sweet spot. Thank you very much for sleeping late.
Yes. Well, that's early for me at 10 a.m. Wake. But anyway, so I'm up. I get my little phone out, and I give shout outs to Shia Capos all the times. For Politico. I read Shia Capos, and then I read Charlie Meyerson in Public Square, and it tells me, folks, what you already know, because you guys have been up since 5 a.m, so you already know this stuff. But I had to be ready to talk about it at 1.
I get up at 7. It's
still early. He gets up at 7 and he chops wood, ladies and gentlemen.
Unless that's a metaphor of some sort that I don't understand. I don't chop wood.
And then there's other publications that I read. And so Charlie was on the show once before, and I think I revealed then, Charlie, I don't know if I did, that I once applied for a job, and you were the guy I had to send my resume to. Did I tell you this already?
I don't remember this story, which doesn't mean that you didn't tell it to me, especially in, our pandemic milieu here. But no, and where was this that you...
I believe, don't quote me, Charlie, but I believe you were just starting the news operation at WXRT, and I had just moved to Chicago.
Oh, no, I think...
And I was looking for...
the news operation was started by Linda Brill, and then Charles, a.k.a. C.D. Jaco, followed her.
Oh, that could have been it, not you.
Confused with
I have the wrong Charles.
An actual distinguished Charles, as opposed to me.
We're going to have to edit the whole thing
let's start the whole show over again, okay? Right now, we'll start it again. Right now. 3, 2, 1, let's go.
It was a different Charles.
A
I
better
humbly
Charles too.
apologize.
CD is a wonderful human being. I was just privileged to see him a few months ago. Well, I guess a couple of months ago, and a great newsman. But he turned you down, huh?
Anyway, neither here nor there. So now you do Public Square, which, in my humble opinion, the readers were absolutely correct.
I have to clarify. The readers did not bestow this honor on us. It was the reader in an editorial sense. It was Jack Helbig, a wonderful critic, who wrote that, which was published in the same issue that provided the readers' choices. They didn't see fit to bestow that honor upon Chicago Public Square, but the reader, in its editorial wisdom, gave Jack the opportunity to declare Chicago Public Square that. So I just want to be clear about that. And if you want to start the show all over again, you can right now. You can start it right now. You can start it.
We would
3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Okay. Well, I recall that CD Jaco was the one that I turned to. Anyway, yeah. So it's one of the first things. It's either you or she. I can't remember. It just varies. Sometimes I click on hers first. Sometimes
Hers
I click on
arrives
yours
first.
first.
Hers arrives around 7 o'clock, I believe.
Yeah, but that's not how I operate, Charlie. It's not literally. It's like I'm going through my phone, and it's like, which one do I want to start with first? And you're totally different. Generally, different links that you have. Different. You're more. She is more straight up political junkie
Because she
stuff
works for Politico.
that I need.
Yes, that's her thing. Politico.
And you're more esoteric, if I could use that word. Like I'm not. It's like whatever's moving you, and at that moment, it seems as though. And so I kind of appreciate yours. Is sort of like the equivalent, if I could. FM rock and roll station back in 1971.
Well,
or something
it's
that.
funny
You know what I
say
mean?
that. Although in 1971 I was in high school, but and I've said this on a couple of occasions. As you know, the central, the formative part of my career was 10 years doing the news at WXRT. So when I sit down to do Chicago Public Square every morning, in the back of my head, sometimes in the front of my head is, would this have made an interesting story for XRT News? And so, again, you get me, Ben. You get me.
Well, yes, I get you. It's kind of like a sort of a distant cousin of a feature that ran in the Reader for years, News of the Weird, which was really popular in the Reader for many, many years. And I would go like when I would do stories on the Northwest side where the Reader, or the Southwest side where the Reader didn't have a strong base there, but I would like encounter the equivalent of the local hippie freak, and he was like, "Oh yeah, man, News of the Weird," and so that was like what the Reader's identity was to people on the outskirts of Readerville. And so I don't know.
So wait, you're saying Chicago Public Square is like News of the Weird?
Some of the items are, I didn't mean to offend you. He's offended.
I'm not offended. I'm just,
it's suddenly like Goodfellas.
I'm actually flattered a little bit because it's not what I'm going for, but because it's pretty it's mainstream stuff. As a matter of fact, one of the criteria that I apply as I pick the stories that go in is, are people going to find this interesting enough to click on it? And so to that extent, it's, it's shaped in part by what I think people are interested in. And I don't know, is everybody interested in weird stuff, or is everybody interested in mainstream stuff?
Well, sometimes the mainstream is weird. And so, and then when it's just presented as though it's not weird, then it's like they're gaslighting you. So there's a little, I don't know, maybe it's where I'm at 10:30 in the morning or 10:15.
That's possible. Speaking of which, so you're coming off COVID. I hope you're coming off COVID. You have endured it. And as you know, your account of contracting COVID was one day this month, the most clicked link in Chicago Public Square. So I am compelled to ask you, how are you, and when are you going to write about it again?
Probably. I'm much better, thank you. Although I have to tell you that I think I have what they call the lingering COVID, which means it lingers. And so he's like, I did a show, Charlie, not to, share too much of my personal life with you, but then immediately I feel like I have to lay down. It's a 20-minute nap. So I took a 20-minute nap in between tapings today. And then, so I got another taping after this.
Wait. I'm not
another nap.
I'm not the focus of your attention. I'm not the only person you're talking to today. Am I just a number to you? How many hundreds of shows are you recording today?
3
and
today. But
I'm not even number one.
That's you're number
I'm
two.
number two. Well, that's appropriate.
You try
So
harder.
you took a nap between shows. Please go on.
Yes. And so that's kind of like, but now I think about it, Charlie, and you're really probing me here with this cross-examination. I probably would take a nap anyways. I can't blame that on the COVID.
I'm a fan of naps. That's one of the joys of doing morning drive radio, which I did for many years, is it completely liberated me of any guilt for taking an afternoon nap. It was part of my routine for many years. So I approve.
Yes. Thank you. So anyway, so yes, and a lot of congestion. Other than that, I've moved on. I did the Hideout show last night. I had the mask on. Everybody, it was outside, so I felt pretty cool. All right, let's get back to Public Square. And I was very pleased when Charlie told me that I was number one that day. So thank you, everybody. So all right, Charlie. So how do you go about the selection of what you think is fit, the news that's fit for Chicago Public Square?
It's very much what I did for years in radio news. And radio news is, predating the internet in this sense. Radio news is what so many of us do now on our own to begin with. You get in the morning, you read the morning papers, or now read the morning papers and check the main news organizations' websites. You look at everything. You can't, in the course of a 3-minute or on occasion in my career, 95 seconds, do everything in the newspaper, everything on the wire service. You have to make hard decisions about, what can I fit in here in the course of 3, 4, 5 minutes, or maybe 10 minutes. We were lucky enough to have some of those newscasts at XRT for a while. And so that same calculus, does this fit? Doesn't it fit? Can it be in another newscast another day? Or is it something that really makes a lot of sense to be in here right now in this edition? And then you line those up in order of, theoretically, most interesting or most urgent or most recent, on down to, things that are interesting but maybe not urgent, that might not have to go in today, or that you might not have time to prepare before, in radio terms, before it's 10 o'clock and time to go on the air. And so that sort of juggling of all these sources, which is what radio news, again, did for years. All this news is happening everywhere. We have wire service, we have newspapers, we're monitoring other radio stations, we're monitoring TV stations. What are we going to tell people about in this 5-minute window? The difference with email, in my case, 10 o'clock weekday mornings, is I can fit a lot more in than you can fit into a 3-minute newscast. I can fit a zillion links if I have the time. So it's, it's basically what's my lead story here at 10 o'clock on a weekday morning. Today, as we talk on Wednesday, much as I would have preferred something that wasn't so well covered yesterday, it was Mayor Lightfoot's formal declaration Tuesday that, she's running for re-election. And then, working my way down, other stories that are relevant or newsworthy, again, for or about Chicago. And I approach this, again, with the mindset shaped as a radio newscaster for Chicago radio listeners is, okay, there's news happening all over the world. Some of it's happening in Chicago, some of it's not in Chicago, but is relevant or will resonate with Chicago readers or listeners, whether it's in Washington or around the world, or whether it's a consumer story that affects everybody everywhere. I mean, all of those things potentially could go into a radio newscast and, potentially go into Chicago Public Square.
You said we would have preferred something that was not as well covered. Why? If everybody in Chicago is talking about it and you want to get people to click on things that they're interested, why would the fact that it was well covered matter to you?
Well, because it's been well covered, especially for people who wake up before 10 o'clock in the morning, Ben. Anyone who's been paying any attention at all to the news knows that she declared yesterday and knew, in fact, for days before and probably months before that she was going to declare. The challenge in doing a news roundup at 10 o'clock on the morning after she declares is, okay, what can we say? How can I present it in a way that will not duplicate everything else everybody's heard? And that was a real challenge today. I'm just looking at it. I began with what I think was a pretty good quote from her in her official declaration. I'm tough. I get angry. I take things personally, and my critics are absolutely right when they tell me those things. I thought it was a pretty good line from her. And then, her official launch video, which a lot of people watching TV probably didn't see in its entirety. And then on to the other people who were already declared against her. And to boot, a Sun-Times editorial slamming her so she doesn't, so there's some balance here, slamming her for her allegedly tough words on crime, calling it, as the Sun-Times did, a swing and a miss, and not for the first time.
No, I mean, I think you should lead with what everybody's talking about, because everybody's talking about it for a reason. It's, it's the news.
Well, yeah, but I can tell you because, I monitor what people click on, that, those kinds of stories that I, at 10 o'clock on a weekday morning, can't advance, or to be even more forthright, point to work by others who have advanced the story, because Chicago Public Square is designed to spotlight the work of, all the great journalists in Chicago and reporting from around the world. And it's not my original work. I mean, the composition of it is my original work, but the heart of it is pointing to others' great work in Chicago journalism. Chicago Public Square would be nothing if there weren't a lot of great reporters doing this stuff. But if those reporters haven't substantially advanced it, and I have no new reporting to point to that people haven't had a chance to see 12 or 24 hours before, then it's a time for Chicago Public Square to consider pointing readers in the direction of things that they haven't seen or heard or read.
Okay, and to that point, I will now read to you the next item, which leads to a question about objectivity. So here we go. Here's the next item from today's Public Square, and its headline begins in bold: "Responsible gun owners are fed up." End of quote. In what even a Fox News anchor called the best presentation that we've seen in a very long time from the White House podium, actor and Uvalde, Texas native Matthew McConaughey delivered an impassioned plea for gun control. And then there are links to the Fox News anchor calling it the best presentation we've seen. And there's a link to Matthew McConaughey's impassioned plea for gun control. The word that stood out that I circled, at least metaphorically circled, was even, in what even a Fox News anchor called. If I were Donald Trump, I would say, see, that's what they do. The mainstream media with their bias that's embedded in there. So, Charlie, what were you getting at when you wrote even?
Well, if you click on that link, the best presentation that we've seen, it actually takes you to the excellent newsletter prepared by CNN's Brian Stelter and Oliver Darcy. And they are the reporters who quote Fox News anchor, who was it? John Roberts. So that's a quote from John Roberts. Now, you could say even, I guess you could argue that, and maybe you are arguing that for Fox News to say it's the best presentation we've seen in a very long time from the White House podium, that's a diss of the Biden administration. You could also, though, and frankly, I perceived it this way, as praise for the White House from Fox News for putting McConaughey, in front of all those reporters for what was really a compelling address.
Well, I would think that the diss is to Fox News.
And more power to me if that's the way you perceived it.
Yes. By the way, I'm not criticizing you for it, Charlie. I loved it. It was like,
Fox News has by and large long since ceded any claim to being a responsible news organization. So that's what I thought it made this an interesting quote.
And the first time Charlie came on the show, it was related to this, was because I wrote, one of his listeners or readers, I should say, not listener, wrote in and quit. It's true. You basically called him a lefty, which is hilarious since this is definitely not lefty. We could talk about the distinction between left and progressive and moderate, whatever, but this is definitely not a lefty perspective.
Yeah, here. And Ben, just a footnote. I've turned that quote into a Chicago Public Square T-shirt.
Yes, I'm very well aware of that. My attorney will be contacting you shortly.
And I have a lot of these shirts, so I'm happy to have people buy them. The quote was, and it's on the back of the red T-shirt that is available at shirts.chicagopublicsquare.com. Too far left for me. Sorry I ever signed up.
And I thought that guy was the biggest crybaby I've ever. Too far left. And so you kind of embraced it, Charlie. I give you credit for that. You know what I mean? You see the way the right plays the game is they sob like the little crybabies that they are, and then reporters bend over backwards to like feed them their BS, act like it's real when it's just fake, and everybody knows it. The only person in America that's a bigger crybaby than all of the right now is Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors. Any basketball fan knows any call against Draymond Green, immediately the tears come out. He's pouring, he's crying, that's what the right wing is like, and that's what that whatever he was, your reader. I keep calling it.
They're interchangeable in my mind. I do the same thing.
Yeah. And so, do you feel pressure, Charlie, when you get some right winger sobbing like a big baby that they are about unfair coverage?
No, although I have to say, since I on a couple of occasions have publicized the reasons why people say they're unsubscribing from Chicago Public Square, most people now do not give me a reason why they're unsubscribing to Chicago Public Square. They just say no longer interested. They check that box. So no, I'm the same guy I always have been. I mean, the nice thing about Chicago Public Square is that I have a very understanding and supportive publisher who has not once told me to change my approach. And that is because that publisher is me. So that's the joy of this new media landscape in which we find ourselves.
The greatest love. That's a song from way back when about loving yourself.
But it is hard to get the publisher to give me a day off. He's an asshole.
And he won't give you a raise.
No. Well, the audience gives me a raise every once in a while.
Yes, we'll get into that. We should have done that earlier, but we will definitely get into that. Stick around, folks, at the end. Charlie will tell you how you can contribute to Public Square and to subscribe to it and all that stuff. So you can be like Ben Joravsky and read it first thing in the morning when you wake up at 10
You can read it for free. You don't have to give me money to read it.
But it's it wouldn't hurt. All right, and then there's usually a shout out or two to a columnist, and I wholeheartedly endorse this shout out you gave to Neil Steinberg. Wrote a very provocative column today. Neil Steinberg, the great columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times, my beloved bright one, home delivered every day, where he asks, and this just sums it all up: why do, quote, we eagerly limit our constitutional rights to shield children from child porn, but not guns? Very provocative essay by Neil Steinberg. Absolutely pertinent question, in my humble opinion, that gets into the twisted psyche of America when it comes to, everything, but in this particular case, guns. So now when you're looking for columnists as opposed to news, quote unquote news, are you looking for opinions that second your worldview? Or are you looking for opinions that challenged your worldview, or a combination thereof?
Yes. All of the above. Honestly, it's hard to find opinions that challenge my worldview and that I consider credible, but I like to find them. I mean, just to toss one out, Steve Chapman, formerly of the Chicago Tribune, which still publishes his work, even though he's now a syndicated columnist, tends to lean libertarian, and I've known Steve for years and value his work. And when he posts something that is relevant to Chicago, it certainly merits consideration in Chicago Public Square. But I look for insightful columnists who are saying things that aren't necessarily obvious to my readers. Neil Steinberg has been a favorite of mine for decades. I can go on and on about Neil, but and I don't always agree with him either. But he is a tremendous writer. He has a knack for turning phrases that I envy. And, he, like you, is someone I like to point to frequently.
Yeah, he has a knack. He's really talented. Yes, he is. And then you love The Onion. I would say The Onion is probably the most quoted periodical in Public Square. This Onion headline, 330 million dead following mass shooting.
Pretty grim today. I have been, going back to 2001, if you search my Facebook files, I believe you'll see that I've been championing a Pulitzer for commentary for The Onion for more than 20 years. I think The Onion is insightful in ways that so many columnists can only aspire to be. And they do it succinctly, and they do it in a timely fashion. Today's is pretty grim, but I got to tell you, in the last several weeks, especially in light of the mass shootings that our nation has endured, The Onion has been spot on so often that I find myself having a hard time deciding which Onion headlines not to include to spice up the mix in Chicago Public Square, and frankly. I have gotten more comments from, friends, people on the street, acquaintances, saying, I really like what you do. I especially like how you link to The Onion. I've heard that more than, nobody says, I especially like how often you link to the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Chicago Tribune or the Sun-Times or the Reader. No, I really like how you put those Onion links in there. So, again, I think it provides often succinct perspective on the news in ways that I wish more columnists did. But I'm happy to point to The Onion's content frequently in Chicago Public Square.
I think that may be working a subterranean way on my brain, which is why I linked you with News of the Weird. That may be the link in my, you know what I'm saying? Remember I said, News of the Weird.
I can see that. I can see that then. Yeah. Okay. I'll take that and I'll wear that as a badge of honor.
Yes. And there's nothing wrong.
Do we want to start the show again over now that we've worked that out? Let's go. We can do it again.
Charlie Meyerson.
2, 1.
All right, here we go. Now this falls under the category of Charlie's obsessions. There's nothing wrong with obsessions, ladies and gentlemen. You cannot be a columnist without having obsessions.
This is an obsession. You're right.
Hundreds of obsessions in my life. I've learned to recognize young Charles Meyerson's obsessions. And this is one of them. Google money for kids. If you're among the Illinois residents hoping to collect up to $400 per person under Google's settlement with those whose faces appeared in Google's photos between May 2015 and April 25th of this year, maybe you're wondering what to do about the children in those photos. This is a thought that never occurred to me in a million freaking years. I wouldn't even have known about the Google thing if it wasn't for Charlie Meyerson. And now I have I wouldn't say an obsession with it, Charlie, but like a mini might grow into an obsession with it. So explain what it is about this story that you are so fascinated with.
Well, it is. It's fascinating. Illinois has this law called the Biometric Information Privacy Act, which has been on the books since 2008. And incidentally, and this is one of the things I love about it, we have a couple of disgraced Illinois politicians to thank for this. Senator Terry Link, who sponsored it before he pleaded guilty to income tax evasion after resigning from the Illinois Senate in 2020, and Governor Rod Blagojevich, who signed it before he was impeached in 2009. These two guys, and there were other lawmakers obviously involved, but they were at the forefront of this. led or were key to passage of this law that basically makes sure that, Illinoisans' biometric identification, their fingerprints, their face prints, anything that, digitally identifies their bodies is something that Illinoisans own. I'm not a lawyer, so please don't, cite me chapter and verse on this. But, basically, it says that companies can't take and use that information without your permission. And in essence, what a lot of social media companies have been doing willy-nilly for years now is taking your facial information and using it to group you and identify you and others that you're on Facebook or Instagram or, in this case, Google Photos, without paying you anything. You've heard, Ben, I know the maxim that, if you're not paying for a service on the internet, you are the product. In other words, that the companies are using your posts, your contributions to their platform to make money, and they're not paying you, and you're not paying them. So what's happening now is under this law, a lot of these companies are being sued, and because they don't go to trial, there are settlements. There was a big settlement that just paid out earlier this year from Facebook to Illinoisans, who again, whose faces were used and identified in Facebook without their permission. $398 to people who, by the deadline, made a claim under the settlement that was reached. It's free money. And for multiple people in one family whose faces appeared on Facebook, that's real money. So now, same thing's happening with Google Photos. Google has settled because in Google Photos, anyone who's uploaded photos, for a while at least, I don't think it's happening now, you could search for a name or a face and Google Photos would show you other pictures of that same person. So now there's a settlement, and people who file a claim can get between $200 and $400 per person, depending on how many people file claims. If your face appeared in Google Photos between May 2015 and April 25th of this year. People have until September 24th to submit the claim form, and it's a really easy form to fill out. It takes about 3 minutes. The hardest part is deciding where you want your money to go, whether you want them to mail you a check or send it to you by Zelle or use Venmo or whatever. And then money comes to you. It's great. It's a wonderful Illinois law. Texas has a similar law, but those are like the only two states that have this.
And so you just Google your name and see if there's a picture of you. Is that it?
Well, it's tricky. If you don't have a Google Photos account of your own, and I do, and in fact, I've uploaded virtually all the digital photos I have over the years to Google Photos. So they're all there going back to, whenever I started taking digital photos, I don't know, 2005, 1998, whenever it was. So, virtually anyone that I have ever taken a digital photo of, or who has sent me a digital photo that I put on my phone, is in my Google Photos account. So all of those people, it's a real rabbit hole. All of those people theoretically can make a claim, and of course, the more people who make claims, the less money there is for everyone who makes a claim. So it's is it in my interest to tell everybody? Because it means less money for me. I've decided, yes, it is. But, there are literally hundreds, probably thousands of photos that I can go through, and I can send an email to everyone that I know and say, hey, you're in Google Photos. Go here to file a claim. You're in Google Photos. Go here and file a claim. So I may be spending a lot of my time between now and September 24th sending emails like that because it just seems like the right thing to do.
How many claims have you filed personally?
I've filed one for Google Photos. I filed one for Facebook. I got $398 from Facebook, and so did a number of Chicago Public Square readers who have expressed their gratitude. So you mentioned, that you might not have thought about some of these things, and neither did I, but my readers have. So, for instance, one of my readers asked the question, how do I know if I'm not a Google Photos account holder, how do I know if I'm in there? And, the only answer that I've come up with so far is you want to check with friends and family to see if they uploaded photos of you. And if they did, you can be a claimant because you're in there. And again, every person that you you have a photo of potentially shrinks your share of the pie, but you can go and file or tell your friends to file.
I get it. It's like property taxes. There's a total figure that they're going to distribute, and the more people that apply, the less per person share. Correct?
Exactly, and it's a bit of a what's the word I want? Not shell game. There's another metaphor. Maybe you'll come up with it. Maybe we'll start the show over again and I'll figure out what it is.
We've started the show.
Today's just to bring us full circle on this. So today, actually last night, one of my readers, Angela Mullins, shared with me something she'd learned, which is, okay, what about my kids who are in Google Photos? Is each of them entitled to a check of between $200 and $400? The answer is yes, but someone who is their parent or guardian has to file for them. Same, 2 or 3 minute process, but where it says to confirm, to certify your signature, you write, Charlie Meyerson, OBO, as in on behalf of
I struggled
Charlie's
with that one this morning.
son. My sons are all not minors, so I can't do this. But it'd be Ben Jarofsky, OBO, little Benny Jarofsky Jr. Is there a Ben Jarofsky Jr.?
No, there's just one.
But if there were, you'd do that, and then little Benny would get a check alongside his dad.
Wow. All right. So it's a good obsession to have. Okay.
It is. I thought of you in terms of your tax increment financing obsession.
Yes.
So
that's just the best one. I got so many. I am right now at the moment. I'm going to ask you about this at the end. So be prepared. I'm going to give you a tease. That's what you guys in radio call it. I'm going to give you a tease,
You're in radio.
Yeah, I was in radio
you
for
guys.
until they realized, hey, wait a minute.
Am.
Let's fire this guy. Now I'm not in radio anymore.
Well, it's okay. We have that in common.
Yes. So anyway, Charlie, this is the tease. I'm utterly obsessed right now. I've actually been obsessed with this person pretty much my whole life, but it has been just on special high alert over the last 2 days because I watched the HBO 2-part HBO documentary about George Carlin. Utterly obsessed with George Carlin.
Started watching it, didn't finish it.
Well, run, don't walk. So we'll get to that. So I have many, many obsessions. Tax increment finding is just one. All right. This is classic Charlie Meyerson that I'm now going to go down a little bit and get to sort of like the featuries part of Public Square. This is classic. Ladies and gentlemen, I know he sounds very young when you're hearing him on the air. You cannot see him. Charlie was talking about that before. I can see him. He can see me. You can't see either one of us. This is audio only. But you would not know this, but Charlie Meyerson is of the baby boomer persuasion and loves radio. Okay, the man loves radio, and so there's generally a lot of radio references of the baby boomer persuasion, which I really get off on because I too am a baby boomer and I too love radio. And this one today, I'm going to do it as if I worked on this radio station. Adding to a rash Chicago radio shakeups, iconic Chicago DJ Bob Stroud is stepping down from his top-rated midday show at WDRV. Let's kick it off with a little fog hat. Sorry. So what made you give that little shout-out to the legendary, the great Bob Stroud?
Bob, first of all, is a wonderful guy, and I've known him more digitally, social media-y than actually in person. But over the years when we met face to face, he's always been gracious. But this is not me, and this is not just me because I'm in radio. I mean, I want to go back to my time at the Chicago Tribune when I joined the web team in 1998 and worked on their website. And it's true today, even now on Chicago Public Square. Stories about Chicago broadcast media are consistently among the biggest traffic drivers to digital websites. Now, that's beginning to fade as generations of younger people grow up not listening to the radio and instead listening to music and information digitally, which I've also championed. But, for better or worse, my audience for Chicago Public Square, which again, for better or worse, kind of skews toward people of my generation, because that's, my Facebook friends signed up for this and their friends, etc. Chicago radio stories like this, which I need to credit to the great Robert Feeder. Each of these items, and I mentioned that Steve Cochran is joining WLSAM. Each of these items comes from Robert Feeder's column, and back in my time at the Tribune, I championed when Feeder was the Sun-Times. I said when Feeder's got a scoop, we should point to Feeder from Chicago Tribune content. We should point to Roger Ebert's content from the Tribune when he has something great in the Sun-Times. I fought that battle. I won that battle for the Tribune's daily email news briefing, Daywatch, which still exists. When I left the Tribune, they stopped doing it. But, so going back to that time, I have known and seen in the metrics that these stories resonate with Chicago readers. And so especially when someone like Bob Stroud, who's been at his position and known in Chicago for decades, or a TV news anchor, who has been, literally in people's faces in their homes for decades. Moves by them resonate with my readers and I think with Chicago news consumers in general in a way that a lot of stories don't. So this isn't, Charlie worked for XRT, so he's putting all his radio friends in there. This is me pointing to Robert Feeder, in this case, doing some work that others are slow to pick up on and that resonate with Chicagoans.
I am with you 100%.
Do I sound defensive?
A little bit.
Okay.
But
let's start the show over again. I don't want to sound defensive. 3, 2, 1.
Well, Ben, that's a great question. But I'm with you 100% about Bob Stroud. I love seeing it in there, and my younger listeners, I know who I'm talking about. But this guy knows rock and roll so well, and it's unbelievable. He does these little tangents, the deep dives, and I enjoy listening to his, him just put that knowledge on display. And so I like this fact that he got a shout out. And I know that's the baby boomer in me talking, young Charlie Meyerson, but that's just a fact.
Yes. Let me add, first of all, I was surprised to learn, because I don't remember. Bob apparently did some time at XRT. I don't remember what that was or when that was. But I want to go back to Chicago Public Square from yesterday, also Robert Feeder, news that the morning jock seat at WXRT is going to be taken by my friend and former colleague, Marty Leonards. And most clicked link in yesterday's Chicago Public Square was not that item, but the item underneath it, in which I said, here's a picture of your Chicago Public Square columnist and the rest of the XRT team, including Marty Leonards, back in the day. And so, my audience is my audience, so you can argue there's some skewing there. But people were interested in an old photo of radio people in Chicago. Number one most clicked item.
Okay, and don't apologize for it. Let me just put it to you this way. One of the ways you stay sane as you get older and face an increasingly more insane world is looking back to a certain degree and looking for things that soothe you, make you feel better about where we are right now. And so that's part of the reason why I love that, George. Now we're going to conclude with George Carlin. And I would love to get your thoughts on the great George Carlin.
Wait, before we go to Carlin, can I quote a reader who wrote me a note yesterday? Said, I don't know how you can write this every day and not curl up into a fetal position, because the news has been so depressing. And I wrote back and said, how do you know that I haven't learned to type in the fetal position?
That's funny. I am in a fetal position. No, the news is bleak. But anyway, so George Carlin. So you say you saw the first part of the documentary, but not the second. Is that correct, Senator?
I am almost done with the first part of it.
Almost done? Jesus.
Almost
what are
done.
you like? What are those guys? You can't.
I watch with my wife, and my wife, unlike me, has a real job, and at some point she needs to go to bed, and I don't like to watch stuff that she started. I don't like to finish it. So we're looking for a time when we can both stay awake long enough to watch more of it.
Did not mean to delve into the personal life of Charlie Meyerson, okay?
No,
staying out of that one. Let's
my life is an
out.
open book. My life is an open book. It's a little too open, actually.
A lot of times, I'll be just watching the shows because my wife will be like, I am not watching another Larry David show. And so I just keep watching them. But All right, so going back, speaking of obsessions, Larry David, but going back to George Carlin. So the first part of the show, it takes to that moment where his career crashes in the 80s, and he's being written off as a has-been. And then the second part of the show really delves into what I call the prophet phase of George Carlin's career, where he started
Is that
doing
profit with a PH or profit
yes, sir.
with an F?
Profit. No, profit with a PH, not profit as in money, although he made money. Profit, as like he was speaking like a prophet, and people would listen to him because he gave them insights in how the world really works that helped them get through the madness of it and to see the logic of an illogical world. And so I thought it was a brilliant setup for what is true. The second part, I'll put it this way, Charlie. The second part to me is what much more enriching than the first part, but you can't appreciate the second part until you've been through the first part, and to see the ups and the downs of this guy's life, the drug addictions he's had, his wife's alcoholism is just failing, being just buried. You talk about cancel culture, canceled. And he's just always on top. It's just so inspirational. Get fired up just thinking about it. So here we go. I'm just going to put it to you as an old radio guy, as a baby boomer, as a guy who grew up in the 70s. And, talk a little bit about George Carlin, the influence he had on you, the influence you must hear at some points. I said this when I was talking about him yesterday. Like, bits I do are so, I'm just literally stealing them from Carlin because I hear him, there's some great radio guys that have influenced me as well, but Carlin's number one. So what's the influence that he's had on you, or has he not had an influence on you?
I remember him as the host of, he was one of the Mr. Conductors on Thomas the Tank Engine, right? I mean, that's not the only thing I remember him from, but that's one of the parts of his career that I don't think anyone who wasn't a parent in the 90s would remember. So that's one of my most recent encounters. But, the way he used to make fun of broadcasters, people who talk like broadcasters. I mean, as you may know, that's been one of my passions for years. I mean, both for myself and for the people that I've supervised and coached is, when you're doing the news, you add authenticity by sounding like a person who's talking and not like a person who is reading a script. So, his mockery of broadcasting is certainly something that affected my perception of broadcasting. And his although his rant against people concerned about germs has not fared so well through the pandemic. It certainly is something that I enjoyed. He basically said, hey, get out there and get dirty. Don't be afraid of this stuff. And, of course, we now have some good reasons to be afraid of this stuff. And, his 7 dirty words, mocking the uptight attitude of our society. One of the nice things that I can do in Chicago Public Square, and I'm on the fence over it, is I can say shit. I can say fuck. I can quote people saying shit and fuck. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I use blanks, S blank blank T. Mainly because I'm concerned about filters that might keep it from reaching some people. But the irony for me in the news business these days is that the place where those obscenities really could be used unfiltered is the print newspaper, which is not being read by young people, which can be kept away from young people, and yet print is still awfully touchy about those things, where it ought to be the one place where communicators can speak forthrightly when quoting people who use obscenities. So anyway, that's a diversion. But Carlin was a truth seeker and a truth speaker, and we could do worse than to model his behavior in so much of what we do.
By the way, that was a nice riff, and particularly at the end with the reference to newspapers. I'm always making fun of them. where they won't write the dirty words that people use every day of their life. So I always ask the newspapers, what are you protecting the people from? Okay, and you're absolutely correct, Charlie. Hey, newspapers, let your freak flag fly. Okay, just let it go, baby.
And ironically, in the digital world where, people can write filters and send, email to the spam buckets if you use those words, people are freer to use those words. I mean, I am, but, the newspapers don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, they don't. But they're just like, in their minds, they're just readers are 92 years old.
Well, and to some extent, there is an economic argument that, those people who are still paying, in many cases, outrageous rates to get the newspaper delivered because that's just a thing they do. Those are the people most likely to cancel because, Horace, they used some of those 7 dirty words.
Well, I can tell you right now, I already showed you this one. 1, here's this one. 2, and here's this one. I still subscribe to this one.
I do too. I get the Trib and the Sun-Times print editions, partly for loyalty, but also because, you can call them and say, I want this rate I just saw advertised, and they'll give it to you because
Charlie, you're unbelievable. I did not know this about you. Know like every single deal. You knew about the Google get the $300 in the Facebook.
I don't know if you know, but you don't know this about me. But I mean, even go back into high school. I on my high school newspaper had a sort of an action line column where readers would write in and ask questions, and we'd get answers. When I started in college radio at WPGU in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, I did a show called Probe where we invited audience members, listeners, to send us their questions. I love being a consumer advocate. The one print magazine I still pay for, Consumer Reports.
Wow, there you go. Right on. By the way, you were a Husky? Do I have that correct?
I was not a Husky. I am the parent to 3 Huskies at Oak Park and River Forest High School. Are you talking about high school? I was an Eagle at Carl Sandburg High School in Orland Park, Illinois. Stand up for Sandburg, the mighty gold and the blue. We'll cheer our team on to victory, and to this emblem we'll be true. Go out and fight now, you Eagles, and fight on fun. Go for Sandburg High on to victory. Go Sandburg High and win this game. You rah-rah Sandburg High, you rah-rah Sandburg High, you rah-rah Sandburg High. I was in the marching band. I don't think I ever sat through a whole football game.
I think that's as good a spot as any to end this interview. Charlie's, as they say at the post office, keep your day job. And thank you very much, Charlie. Give folks the information they need.
Oh, I will. Yes,
to subscribe. Go ahead.
Just go to chicagopublicsquare.com. Or if you want, subscribe.chicagopublicsquare.com. And it's free. My goal is to get as many people reading this as free as possible. This will always be free if I have my way. And because I am the publisher, it will always be free. And then, every once in a while, we ask you to kick some bucks in to help keep it coming, to keep me from quitting. That's the subtext here is give us some money or I will quit. But meanwhile, and for everybody, it's free. ChicagoPublicSquare.com. Come visit, sign up, get the email, or just visit the website. Ben, thank you very much. You've been a gracious host.
You're very welcome. Thank you. The great Charlie Meyerson. And I, folks, am a daily reader. Okay, so you want to be like me, read the Public Square. All right, thank you very much, Charlie Meyerson. I'm Ben Joravsky. Take care, everybody.